Then we'll spend another 15 minutes on the questions of guidelines, rubrics, and evaluation. And finally, as a kind of overarching team, we will discuss larger, broader questions revolving around infrastructure and resources, which will be led by Fuji. Just a little bit of, well, administrative things. This conversation will be part of a special issue of Francophone journal called Sciences du Design, so Sciences of Design. It's the 10-year anniversary of the journal, and the topic will be around contemporary issues of education to research. And this conversation will be part of the journal. Exceptionally, the journal for this time around will publish the conversation obviously in English, but it will also be the topic of a translation in French. So it will be a bilingual publication. So what we ask you is, but at one point, and I'll bring this QR code back, but please go online. We have a very simple form just so that we can collect your names and we can give you credit where credit is due. So it's a very simple form, just to give us your name, your affiliation, and just what the question that you ask so that we can keep track. And we can also share with you the paper once it's been published. That's for Sciences du Design, and I'll bring it back at the end if you are not able to capture it now. Then, as I said, we have a live visualization. If you want access to it, there's a link or a QR code.
Well, and right now another network issue popped up. So this link will link you to where we will eventually publish a recording of the live visualization for today. So go ahead and save the link.
So for those of you who want it, it's go to osu.edu/DRS-biz with a Z. And it will bring you to the great work of Will. All right. With that introduction complete, we'll move into our first topic, managing cultural factor. I will be putting my, I'll put a buzzer. So we're going to try to be strict a little bit and be procedural. So that we can cover our three topic and have time at the end to have a broader conversation as a conclusion.
Thank you, Sebastian. So I'm Fabienne Munch. I prepared 2 prompts and then a few notes on the side just to stimulate the conversation. The first prompt actually echoes what Sebastian mentioned about doctoral education being a cacophony. Margolin wrote that in 2010. I think it has not necessarily become something that's more smooth. And I like this term literally because it feels that it's a Babel tower. And as I am not of native English language, we know for those of us who have studied in other language that the English lingua franca is great for us to converse, but it does not capture all the subtleties of some other languages. So how does that impact doctoral studies in design? The other prompt was that is coming from another angle from Philippe Diribarne, who wrote a lot about cross-cultural situations. And we know that in real life, cultures resist. It is unrealistic to ignore cultural diversity, particularly when in a PhD in design, we have students coming from different education backgrounds. Some have, they come with their historical cultures, historical values. Some will be more focused on aesthetics than on process. Others might be more focused on the community, other more on individual relationship, other more on craft, other more on technology. So they come with this whole ensemble of values and beliefs to a PhD in design. And how does the administration of a PhD in design actually embraces this diversity and enables students to actually can express their voice, express their design research culture, and how does that also impact their relationship with their thesis director, who is most likely coming from a different culture. I also wanted to prompt some conversation on how local laws, ethics, and plagiarism have variable interpretations depending on where you come from. I mentioned the language barriers, but language barriers also impact the literature references that you will reference in your doctoral studies. We know that most of the publication are on design or English. So are we in a situation for a PhD design student of a hit or miss when it comes to English literature? And then also wanted to capture that because I was part of a project for 3 years in the European Union where there are attempts from several universities to move towards an alliance that would actually aim toward a common PhD in research, innovation, and society among those 9 countries. It's a tall order, but if other disciplines do it, design. So are we doing this now or are we presenting the 3 buckets?
No,
We're doing the conversation.
We'll do the
here.
conversation for the next 15 minutes. And again, I don't think anybody here will have answer. I think it's important that we consider this as a space to share
exchange.
experiences, even if they're anecdotal. And how to manage it. What are other challenges that are rising up that we need to equip ourselves as the discipline of design to be able to face and be successful in conducting and hosting our PhD program in our institutions.
Given the fact that student at the PhD level comes from all over the place, I mean, we have in our cohort a multiplicity of culture that we have to deal with. So how do we do that? How do we prepare ourselves institutionally speaking to deal with that? And also, well, so this is the question. So do you have any experiences of how this is being dealt with in institution, or are they you live through it?
Or maybe you've been able to encompass this diversity and have examples of or success stories to share or personal experiences.
Yeah, so
So we gotta start.
for me, so when I was doing my PhD at Lancaster University, it was really interesting because I was working, my topic was all about Turkey and Eastern Turkey. So at the start, I was quite hesitant, like how it would be kind of like negotiated and mediated. But then I think it always comes down for me to the supervisors. I had a fantastic supervisor, Stuart. He was both knowledgeable about the history and culture, but he was also really helpful in how I could navigate being in between 2 cultures. And I think the point where he and my other supervisor mentors at Lancaster University, when they told me that it's important, because we're talking about literature, it's important that I also bring what is like in Turkish literature about this topic into a different language. It is creating new knowledge, right? In a way that it's like the first steps of creating it. So I think that was kind of like the point where I switched my mindset. It was really helpful. So now that I'm supervising PhD students, I always have it on the back of my mind that I think that personal touch in creating the knowledge when you're doing a PhD is an important point. So you have to keep in mind that you're also bringing your personal story into a PhD research.
Being as you're talking about Lancaster, maybe I will. And I don't know many people, most people in the English culture know of a paper called "Not Everything is Made of Steel is a Battleship." Now, that was a paper, it was at a conference, I think it was the one after your conference. It was the conference on Doctoral Education Foundation for the Future in La And it was my PhD supervisor, John Langridge. And basically what he said was, battleships are made of steel, my fork is made of steel, therefore my fork is a battleship. And what he was meaning was PhDs are given for research. If somebody says PhDs are given for research, and I'm an artist, and I engage in research during my artistic practice, therefore my art is a PhD. Is that the answer? And that's where you come into the administration. What is a PhD? Now, if we go back to 1998, there's been a lot of discussion about PhD. My view, and I think my colleague there who led a whole consortium for me, a doctoral consortium, Naomi, we in the UK, we get funding for cohorts of PhDs, right? We can bid for it. Now, actually, Hazel wasn't one of those, but when I formed Imagination Lancaster in 2006, it was at the basis of the education. This is administration. There was no design at Lancaster University. So they said, how are you going to bring the money in? I said, we're going to do it by PhDs. Odd. You usually bring your money in with undergraduates because undergraduates bring 3 years of funding. I said, PhDs bring 3 years. And if we can have a PhD program first, that we can fund research through PhD. You can do research at undergraduate level, but it's not. So we turned the triangle around. And so Imagination was always more PhDs than undergraduates.
Interesting.
So this is administration.
Absolutely.
And it funds research.
Absolutely.
Right? And it funds a cohort of people who go out in the world and do research. But in order to do that, to bring as many people from different, and Lawrence did his PhD with us as well. In order to do that, you have to be, I'm really worried about this being recorded. You have to be very loose with your definitions of research, and in one sense. But it is about the research method and doing research, not coming and being an artist and doing research for your art, but actually
Design.
a PhD, from our perspective, is a training in research methods. It's a training so you can go and teach other people about how to do research, to be credible, to be viable, realistic, transferable, etc. However, in saying that, we do not have to stick to the science principles I'm coming to it. The science principles of doing a PhD. So I'm going to give you an example. The slides are up there. Can you get to them?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Naomi,
This one or the-
yes, we had some funding for, well, it was 21 PhD students. And we decided to do a completely new way of looking at PhDs. The PhD student came in and they were told they're going on a journey. They were going to work with 3 months, they were going to co-create a project with a company or a group of companies. They were going to work together in teams and they were going to do work. Naomi there was the knowledge exchange associate, weren't you? And she was the person who was building, we were running workshops. We did sandpits with small businesses. Students were allocated, they worked with those small businesses for 3 months. They worked on a problem and a challenge. And they also had a non-academic partner, which was the company. They had another academic partner, supervisor from maybe another university who was skilled in knowledge about that. And then they had their university academic partner and they did mini projects. And the next slide. There's the other one.
This one.
And so the whole PhD was the grey line was the labs, the mini projects, collecting, and their PhD was research methods training, was and a continual observation, reflection of what they were doing. So they had to their PhD emerged, their new knowledge emerged from a reflection. So it's action research in action in companies. Okay, now coming back to administrating, how did I get that? How did we actually get the university to? I don't quite remember how we got the university to do it.
Well, it wasn't university, it was the AHLC
Yeah.
funded for knowledge exchange
Yeah.
hub, so it was.
Yeah, so they funded it, but the university had to approve the PhDs when they're finished. They had to go through the stamping, the rubber stamp system. Basically, we didn't tell the university we were doing that. We just did it. And they produced a thesis and a portfolio of work. We went through the normal external examiners. We did what the university said. We filled in the forms. We got the normal external examiners. They had a thesis. So all that mattered to the university was they had a proper viva. They had a proper thesis at the end. But how we got there was completely suited to the student, the companies they were working with, and their advisors. And I would say, although Hazel wasn't part of that, our attitude in terms of our supervision is we embrace the person's sort of context, zeitgeist, and knowledges and knowledge bases. And it's the process of supervision that is the most important.
Thank you.
Stop there.
Great, thank you so much. I see Carlos has his hand raised, so please, the room is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me here. And I'd like to comment on this topic about the administration. My main comment is coming from my perspective at the Institute of Design. So keep that in mind. I interact with a lot of programs around the world in different scales, different nations, from Brazil, my home country, and into Asia, from China into the European one. So a broad spectrum that I have seen from the outside and have interacted. But from the inside view, I've been the director of the PhD at the Institute of Design in the last 8 years, but I also had the experience of being a PhD student, joining in '98. So I was at Ohio conference, on the Doctoral conference over there, the year that I joined it, and had the opportunity to participate in those discussions as a student, and later on coming back now as the director. The point that I want to comment and add to the discussion here from the perspective of a small program. So we have a lot of unique aspects. We are the first one in the United States, but we are also a small one, and we are a small school. And we are not in one large university. So we have a lot of unique compositions that makes the PhD in the Institute of Design kind of very unique. So I'm not trying to comment on the things that I'm talking about administration that relates to all the different programs. I'm really trying to just bring an inside perspective. My main comment is that my experience as a director is that small changes in the administration matters, and they matters a lot. Sometimes we tend to think about big transformations and do a major policy and protocol change, but because we are small and we can afford doing that, trying to tweak more on the administrative side and think about how they impact the quality of the program. One of the changes that I want to highlight is that I try to change the admission process to make every candidate that contact us and want to join the PhD program, that they have to have a small orientation with me, the director, before they even start engaging on the intention of applying to the PhD program. It's a very time-consuming activity, and but it's a worth activity because it gives you opportunity to explain what the program is. It allows always me to contextualize what is a PhD, what is a PhD in design, and what is a PhD in design at the Institute of Design. So I always go through those 3 levels for them to understand where they are pretending to situate themselves into this next journey of their work. And usually this takes several months, and then they decide to apply. They engage on several conversations with potential advisors. We always encourage them to have a trip to the Institute of Design and visit us. They talk to other PhD students. So it's a pre-process before they admit, but this is allowing us for the candidates to really understand what we are for, and for them to do a very customized application to us. Traditionally, most of the PhD programs, they are based on what I have seen. They are based on the process of looking at the candidate's qualification and then looking at the expression of interest of the research. My experience has been that they come with a very weak understanding and very superficial understanding what is a PhD. And they are always trying to think about what they learned in their masters and what they have as a challenge now that they want to do in the PhD. Many of them, they want to do the PhD to educate themselves. And I'm always telling them, like, you're not coming here to learn more, you're coming here to produce new knowledge. And that's a major shift in the conversation. So I'm trying to show here from an administrative point of view, this issue of the culture, that we have done a change in the admission process where we spend almost a year with the candidate even before they do submit any formal application. And we have all those intimate conversations and multiple iterations. They have to develop a full proposal, and they have to have an advisor that wants to work with them, and then they submit the application. So this is what we have done, and I don't know how much this would apply to other institutions, how these other institutions, if they are also doing something similar to that. But this process allows us to try to think about this misalignment of culture, that it's a big one, and to set expectations, to align expectations, and also to raise the quality of the research significantly, because it's a real match between the candidate and what we can offer and the advisors' work that they are going to be working with.
Thank you, Carlos. So you said about a year before they send their application. That's the time frame of the process that they come and see you and have this exchange with you. You said 1 year?
Yeah, so it could be, so usually the cycle of fall admission, people contacting now this summer, they initiate conversations. They need to understand what is going to be the cost of that, what is the financial implication, how long it takes for them to graduate, what is their future projections around it. So there is a kind of orientation around this process. And I'm saying 1 year because it takes several rounds for them to digest the basics, like, oh, the cost. Oh, it's very expensive. Like, what do you mean by expensive? And what is your future plan? Where do you think that you're going to go with that? So we do several conversations because they come back with reflections from previous conversations. And there are some times that we advise them to go to other programs because it's not a good fit into here. And I'm saying 1 year because there are other candidates that sometimes take 3 years. They come, they talk, and they realize that they are not ready to do the PhD. They keep following us. They keep looking at others, and they touch base. And then there is a moment where they realize that, okay, my kids are grown up now. I'm in a new job that allows me to do that. Or I'm wanting to quit my job and now I want to go for the PhD. So there are several moments where they say, I'm ready now. And the conversation can be from 6 months to 3 years. That has been the type of conversation that we have engaged in.
You have more time? Is this the question?
Oh, so I'm sorry, Sarah, Chief from MIT. I'm reflecting on these conversations in relation to the conversations this morning around systems change and systemic thinking and dealing with complexity. Because if we're dealing with it, I agree entirely. I mean, I hate administration, but I love administration as a tool and a mechanism, right? Because what we're talking about is systems and mechanisms and levers. And how do you work with power? How can you be power or embody power to make those changes? So I was thinking about champions and having champions who can then are prepared and are given time and resourcing to work with those levers. I spent the first part of this morning looking at an ethics application and talking about the fine points of an ethics application. And what was in my head, because I manage research for the School of Design, right, administer it, was who is on the ethics boards and what is their understanding of practice research, or what is their understanding of design research. And I know that in my role, I would love to see a transcript because I have to edit to make sure that anything I say is publishable, obviously. But a lot of it is trying to understand, sort of 5 steps down, what is the implication of this going to be, and what types of systems do we need to have in place, and what types of knowledges and what types of empathies do we need to have in place. And so whether that's sort of the ethics boards, or whether it's admissions, or all of these pieces. So I guess it's a plug for considering this kind of work as designing, right? It's infrastructuring, it's facilitating, it's holding space. And I think it's also around empathy and all the work that we're doing around social design and recentering and decolonial comes in as well, right? And I think this speaks directly to the point around managing cultural factors. One of the pieces of infrastructure that that we work with in that, I guess we're also trying to connect that work with the administration, right? So what is the qualification for a PhD? And how are people expressing those qualifications? How are they expressing their research methods? What types of literatures are appropriate at a milestone so that someone has confirmation that they can progress to the next stage in their candidature. And so using those administrative moments, which are common across the university, as reflection points to do some peer learning as a team and say, well, are we sure that we understand, how do we know? If someone says, oh, no, that's not as well, okay, but where is the student coming from? And is that, is this actually an appropriate literature for this project? So again, is why I love administration and mechanisms, because you can use little moments like that to prompt these types of reflexive learning moments.
Thank you. Administrative moment as reflection.
Thank you. Maybe Lorenzo wants to go next.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm not sure if I will touch exactly on the topic of cultures, but I will try somehow to explain my experience both with the PhD program that we started in Rome since 1 year ago, and with the experience we started also with Cumulus Association, with the Cumulus PhD network. Usually in Italy, we used to have local PhD programs. That means that are somehow rooted in the department, and usually are somehow interdisciplinary. That means that it's not only about vertical on design, but it's also matching planning, architecture, restoration, and many different topics related to the local department. But since a couple of years, the policy now changed in Italy, and we are allowed to open up associated PhD programs. That means that it's not only the local department, but we can match other departments nationally. So we started this PhD program on service design for public sector. So pretty much it's very vertical. So we choose a topic which is quite clear and quite large, but still very, very clear and focused. And we are connected together with Polytechnic of Milano, U of Venice, and then University of Bologna, ESE of Florence, ESE of Rome, and of course, Sapienza University of Rome, which is leading the network. And every single university is providing a scholarship. Sapienza is providing more than one scholarship every year. And we have some activities that are online and some activities that are in person. workshops, like workshops. And of course, it's pretty much about research in design and training in research. So we're pretty much training our doctorates to do research. And we have a first year, which is pretty much about training in research, so classes, clear classes. And I have to say that until a few years ago, the way that we used to have a PhD program, at least in Italy, was a bit different because it was very loose. We did not used to have classes. It was pretty much about having a sort of experience. And now we are coming from a sort of research experience, 3 years of research experience, to the idea of educational experience. So they get a sort of research educational experience, which is pretty different. And it's also pretty much changing the idea which is behind that. And it's also, let's say, extending the idea of the master, into the idea of the PhD. So it's there is more continuity between the two. And of course, as I said, our program, the very first year is pretty much about classes, teaching. Second year, it started to be more loose and to get more to the idea of experience, and the PhD students are more free to develop experiences. Of course, they keep on tutoring in the classes. They keep on, doing research also with the tutors, and also they get an international experience. While the third year, it's pretty much about writing the thesis and doing their specific research related to the thesis. This brought up a number of challenges because of, as you can imagine, having students that are in different places is challenging us in order to see how much they meet, they can network, they can work together. Of course, online is helping us, but it's not enough, of course, as you can imagine. So this is pretty much. And looking into the statement of Margolin, I have to say that I found the idea of cacophony a bit negative. I will change that into complexity. We have so many PhD programs around the world that I would say that there is a sort of complexity of research in design, PhD in design, and that is also very rich and interesting. And so with Cumulus, we started this Cumulus PhD network in order to help connecting one each other, the different PhDs. We are working at the moment into a platform that is helping pretty much to network the people, different professors, so that you can have, let's say, defense committee that is mixed up with in different places and different PhD programs. Also, the PhD students, they might find tutors related to the topic they're working on in different places. And so I think that this kind of complexity can be supported with the idea of networking, that I think it should be very convenient and should also bring us the PhD programs to the next level, at least to develop some kind of knowledge, to develop some kind of communication, let's say. Not even knowledge, even communication is a form of knowledge in between the different PhD programs that will help and support, of course, locally the different programs. Our PhD program in Rome is international and is in English, so we really welcoming international students. Everything is in English, and we mix up, of course, how you say that, the books that the students might read, that could be in English, that could be in Italian, of course. So far, most of our students are Italians. Next year, we're also having another university which is associated from France. So we're going to have more international students for the future. Looking into the number of people that are submitting as a candidate, I can say that 60% of the students are international, are coming from anywhere in the world. And I think this is very interesting for us, challenging, but also very, very interesting for us, which I wish really is bringing us to the next stage. But again, we're starting now the second year, so it's pretty early to give a final, big picture. But I guess, the idea of networking between different departments and different places in the world, I think that will support the idea of a network of PhD that is pretty much looking to the future. The other challenge we have is that we're having also a large support also from the industry since few years that is opening to the idea of industrial PhD. That means that we training researchers that will find a place in industry, not only in university, which is also very, very interesting. That means that the idea of research and the idea of innovation is applied not only to university, but to academy, but it's also applied to the industry, to companies that I guess really need a lot of innovation. And I think design and the research in design can be also very, can support innovation in the industry and in society. Our focus is service design for public sector. So of course we look also into administration and also to idea of innovation in administration. That also think that should be, there is a large space to work on. Not sure if I'm covering, the questions that you're asking, but I'm here also to follow up maybe with the next questions.
Thank you.
And just a quick follow-up, Lorenzo. I think innovation in PhD programs is what design research PhD programs should be about. So we should always think about how we innovate. And the other program we had the Creative Exchange program. We had 5 years of, we had 50 PhD students funded by the government on a program called Highwire. And it was called Highwire because we thought the PhD students were risking their lives because it was a joint program between computing, management and design. And so they had supervisors from at least 2 of the departments. And the Highwire was because they were risking the sort of balance of a different discipline and trying to transverse the Highwire between different disciplines. And that was also an industrial one. So they worked with companies and they had supervisors from 2 departments. So again, it was a sort of curated program. So I think, and I'm always pushing the idea that design PhDs should not only be innovation in the content, but innovation in the way we push the administration and the structure of them and the knowledge that they gain from different perspectives. And that's why doing a joint one across Italy is great, and then doing a collaboration across the world is even better.
That's a good segue to the next topic on guidelines, evaluation, and rubric. This is often, I think, a topic that is also undervalued or overlooked, but it's also of significance. How do we evaluate student? As a former student myself, I remember entering my PhD not really knowing what I was setting myself in, and there was no real substantial criteria.
Well, I was the first person in the UK to get a PhD in design.
That's
So, in design, not design history. I think it was design history before me, but I was completely in that position.
and it's scary for a student. And as a graduate chair, now students come to my office asking, what is it that I'm supposed to do?
But isn't that part of what a PhD is about?
Sure, part of it, to some extent.
No, I mean, there are PhD programs that are completely, almost all taught. We taught programs right until the last year, and the thesis is a much smaller, so a much smaller element of it. And I think the philosophical stance is, what do we want from a PhD program? And is it about generating independent, critical thinkers who understand the methods and the processes of generating a PhD? Obviously, we can teach some of that, as Lorenzo was saying, you know, have a year of, you know, or some training. But you do want people who go, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, and actually in most PhDs, I'd say half of it is, I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know if this is the right research question. And in fact, most people change their research question in the last year because they've actually found they've identified.
It's the last thing I wrote.
Change when you're writing a PhD. So there is a sense of I'm on a high wire and I'm trying, and the role of the PhD supervisor is to make them feel a little safe.
Yep.
Is to help them, guide them through that process. So don't worry, you'll get there. Don't worry. Now go like that and go like that. Go like that and go like that. And then you find another direction. So I'm sorry for the people who are doing this action research stuff.
I got a great one.
That's the role of supervisors, surely.
Isn't that also the role of the peer community?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Oh,
Because,
yes.
and that's when you were talking about cohorts, because it's that peer learning and the trying out and the testing in multiple venues and having that feedback from your peers.
Oh, yeah, when we had the cohort of our creative exchange cohort, there was a period where they all came to us almost in tears, you know, going, oh my God, well, this is ridiculous, you know, ridiculous, we can't do this, didn't they?
I think it's also worth mentioning that, you know, you mentioned they all were on all these little projects. Some of those projects failed, and didn't do what they were intended to do and didn't come out with the outputs they wanted. And that, I think it was that, having that cohort to say, that's okay, that's part of the process.
Exactly.
And I think that, I was gonna say, I think that this can also be tied with administration. So like for us, the milestones are public and the, you know, the cohort come and the supervisors all come. And then we have work in progress in between them. So the candidates are always practicing and they're always getting feedback and they're giving feedback and they're seeing each other progress and change.
And I think it comes down to that failure, because what you learn from that failure, and it also counts as research, right? Because as designers, we do kind of like, we are inclined to have these positive outcomes all the time. But again, coming back to my research, that was the point where I had to change my research question to what can I contribute, or if I could contribute to the cross sector with a designerly intervention. So I think that was, again, that mind shift and then what you're learning, but also.
So I think, you know, when we come back to these milestones or processes, it's having the core structure with the milestones that don't feel like, you know, heavy examinations that help people, guide people. But there's a point where some people, you have to say, no, this isn't working. And we have to, that I've come across supervisors who let people go through the milestones and struggle and struggle and fail. So, you know, it's a responsibility also of making sure there's that administrative structure is loose enough, but also occasionally has the strength to
Pick them up.
to pick them up or let them go.
And that's where the point of it, if you've got a group of supervisors and you've got clear criteria, which, you know, seeing that, how are they supposed to know where to go and where to get there, or what are they going, you know, in the, I guess it's the absence of consensus, but the absence of consensus means that you're constantly forced to consider, right? So again, it's that reflexive administration work.
But as grad chair, I'm kind of the steward of the program, making sure that it can continue and respect the spirit of the aims that were agreed, you know, long time, way before I was even at my current university. So the question is that how do we keep that spirit and that program sustainable while still allowing it to evolve? And
I also think that there's if you're in a design school or an institute of design or whatever, you are innovating, you are supporting, but you also, not a barrier, but you're also protecting the graduates from the institutional administration, which can sometimes be overbearing and not clear. And so, you know, we are protecting them from that sort of, you know, postgraduate office at senior level, or even the ethics to faculty level. Because if there isn't somebody from design on an ethics committee, then you have got an ethics application going backwards and forwards, and you're reading, and also you need a cohort, not just the supervisors, but another cohort of staff who you go, oh, we've not got through ethics again, can you help? So, you know, it's about a cohort of academics who are willing to help innovate within the design system and protect from an administrative system that is sometimes overbearing, too logistical, and you know, and you sort of have to say, yeah, you have to sort of.
We have two comments, one online from Carlos and then one.
This is fascinating discussion. I want to highlight just an observation about how we do from an administrative point of view, the guidance, rubrics, evaluation. One of our core principles is to not only protect the school, the department, the program from the higher administration of the university, but we also try to protect the advisors from even the department level, the school level. So at least as director, I try to transfer almost like full autonomy into the advisor level. The advisor can make a lot of decisions in terms of the process. Of course, we have institutional rubrics, but we try to give maximum flexibility for the advisors to be able to define how to navigate and how to accommodate the unique aspect of a certain work and a certain researcher into the rubrics. And one from an administrative point of view, one of the changes that we did just this year, so we are going to start a new academic year with the new protocol, is on the final deliverable of the PhD. And I'm highlighting that because what I have seen is that as much as we talk about supporting the structure of navigating the PhD, I found out that most of the protocols and most of the challenge that happens is because it's based on what is the outcome. So a lot of questions such as why I'm doing this exam, why I'm doing this requirement, if you map out, it's basically a stepping stone towards what is going to be the final deliverable. And people that haven't been too much used to think about the whole program or understand how the program works, especially advisors, faculty, administrators, they end up being caught up too much in the stepstone and not seeing the full arc and the final outcome. This is to say that one of the things that we detected is how much we at the Institute of Design were locked into the idea of a monograph and a PhD dissertation as the only option for a final deliverable. And this how much the whole process is locked in satisfying all the requirements so you can get into the final monograph and have the dissertation. How much resource is embedded into that? What is the network that people build? And how much the advisors, they were locked in. How many times I had advisors saying, but I'd like to work with this external advisor. Yeah, you can do that, but the barrier of doing that is so high that it's easier for you to work just internally. So we did a change from only accepting individual monograph, the PhD dissertation, and we moved to multi-article dissertation. So now we have that if you have 3 articles and you can write the introduction, the conclusion, you can package that as a multi-article dissertation. I know this is a very well-established practice in PhDs, in many disciplines, even design schools, Aalto University in Finland, they do that. But we were locked in since the beginning, the 30 years of our program, we were only locked into the individual monograph. And the goal here is that this would allow a lot of flexibility for the advisors to build network, because the candidate can write different papers. As long as they are the first author, they can write papers with different advisors. and we are replacing exams with papers if they get published. So there is this out-facing network and exchange rather than an inside satisfaction of all the requirements. So I just wanted to highlight one of the administrative changes that we have done, because I think this for us is a very significant one, that again is one of those small changes that we believe is going to make a big impact, because this would allow advisors to rethink the process of doing the research, accommodating all the changes that they do through the work, but being able to, through papers, get some phases and milestones and allow them to later on articulate the broader arc of the research and contribution.
Thank you. My name is Juan Salamanca. I'm faculty at the School of Art and Design at the University of Illinois in Champaign, Urbana. And I want to share a couple of points from my experience as a collaborator in a research proposal to create a PhD program in my department, in a large institution with a lot of tradition and very like rigid and classic. And also my experience as PhD advisor in the PhD informatics, the branch of design and technology and society. So the first thing is that in the United States is the MFA is considered a terminal degree. And that was one of the points to like make harder the argument to explain why it's important to have a PhD in design if you have a terminal degree in MFA, and what is the differences there. And I think it comes to the point of like, what are the assessment that you're gonna do at the end. And I think we have like the reference, and like every dissertation may have this question at the end, is like, what is the contribution? What is the significance of the contribution? And I think in that moment, the reference point is very important to have a baseline to understand what is the contribution, because some students may get into the program having in mind that they are going to learn more tools of the trade, and it's kind of like the level of the master's degree, and it's for them might be a good transformation or change, but it's not the significance we're expecting. And so we are arguing that the significance is in the contribution to discipline, like in a way that you can generalize your concepts and into the field. But it was a struggle, and it was difficult to make that argument, and so the PhD program is at this moment on hold. But it's that experience, I think, in my similar to other universities, that the MFA it's like establishes somehow, like in some institutions considered the top degree. So I just want to bring that point because it's a perspective also in this idea of like a cacophony of.
Just to get back to the idea of the, and oh, sorry, did I take your turn?
No.
The question of the how do you assess this? I mean, when you ask a student, or you're supposed to evaluate the contribution of a work on the knowledge. I mean, this contribution, only time will say if it's a good, big, important, or not important contribution. I know that at the University of Montreal, we have rubric to evaluate PhD. It's the same rubric for all disciplines, complete university in medicine, law, all schools are there. And there are very formal rubric, like is the candidate can write, can he develop his idea, can he run an argument, can he do a good literature review, can he do it completely, rigorously. So there are very formal rubrics, so they're kind of not very exciting rubric, but it does give you at least it's fair for a student because a student can read those rubrics. Sebastian, you could have had access
Sure.
to those rubrics. You would have known what would be evaluated in your PhD. And so it's and still, even if they're a bit dull evaluation criteria, they do say something about the value of the person you have in front of you. And after that, you can only, for the contribution to knowledge, I mean, you wish, and as a supervisor, you read and you say, it's super interesting. Will it stay? Will it, keep on being interested and interest other people and will be able to build on that knowledge. But this is really impossible to assess, I guess. I like the simple rubric of the University of Montreal. Can this person write? Can he drive an argument correctly? Can he do a literature review? Does he knows his field? Does he or she have a command of his field correctly? This is manipulable. This is accessible. The other stuff is not accessible. And I think if we put too much emphasis on that, we have to put emphasis on that. But if we put too much emphasis on that, we are unfair. We have to say to them, we want you to have a good head on your shoulder.
It comes back to that whole thing about contribution to knowledge is about that much. Ability to critically assess the literature in your field or the fields you're looking at, ability to put an argument together, ability to understand which method you're using in a whole landscape of methods, from science, social science to the arts. To make that is what you're looking for. You're looking for and knowing the contribution you've made or not, and how much it is. But most PhDs stay on a shelf in a library. And most people, if it's going to get out there and change, it will be a book or a paper or something else. That's why writing the papers is an interesting thing to do.
Can I comment on that point?
Go ahead.
I think, well, 2 points connected vaguely, but the first point really is actually from an administration point of view.
This is Louise from Harriet Watt in Dubai.
I think from an administration point of view, from the design journal, I think what we observed was a need to support doctoral researchers to publish and to understand publishing and to use that as a vehicle to, one, understand how they manage the culture of research, but a global design research community, and two, to actually just have distance and to have international peer reviewers with their work. And that, I think, is a really important part of how we develop going forward. Just standing back from our own higher education institution as the administration, because I think it's a broader issue that comes in. We've still got work to do in that space, but I don't want us to forget that there is that issue. The second, I think, is to do with staff. But staff are also doctoral students and how we support them to go through, and they're often given a very different set of parameters to work with. I'm setting up a new design research culture in the Middle East, and within the design school there are 47 cultures within there, and it's a very different set of challenges when it comes to training and supervising and understanding just what we have in front of us. I don't think in my 25 years of higher education and doctoral studies I've ever come across that it challenges fundamentally everything from day one all the way through. And one of the key things we're doing is actually for supporting staff to get their PhD is to actually just ensure that they do a qualification in PG Cert and research methods, because it does two things. It allows them to learn research language and an introduction to research methods, and during that build a PhD proposal. That doesn't bite into their actual doctoral time. So for staff, I think we have to really rethink just how we're supporting the staff to get the PhD, so we've got the supervision for this next generation in this multicultural environment that we're now going into.
No, I think that relates to your issue about the NFA being the terminal degree. Actually, in the landscape of things, it becomes a political issue. In the UK, the reason the design PhDs went stratospheric is because universities in the late 80s, early 90s were all evaluated on their research. not just the science and the social science, but the art schools and the design departments. And if they didn't do research, they got less funding. And if they didn't do research, they couldn't do research because they hadn't got PhDs. So MAs were not enough. So then staff had to start getting PhDs, and then they had to have a PhD student. So actually, it was a total countrywide political change.
And in the Middle East, Rachel, I would
That's
say
what-
that it's different. There's no reliance on government funding or just that sort of insistence really
Yeah.
to develop in this way.
But-
So the collaboration with industry is actually, you're having to negotiate differently with them.
But do you not think in the Middle East, I know because I know somebody who's a vice chancellor of a Middle Eastern university, they are trying to raise their level of research quality globally within their institutions. Therefore, they're trying to do the same thing in terms of pushing the research quality and the research and the publication and the PhDs up.
I don't know if I can speak to that sort of generality that's there, but I think in terms of being design, especially within a STEM university and actually just being going forward, it's a very different set of challenges. I think that it's you have a political game to play that comes in, but the model to work with industry to actually just have to have an industry strategy to work with them to see what are the issues, where can we help, and to then build on. Because in the UK, we would do a memorandum of understanding for the collaborative doctoral thing that's there. It's not the same. So I think I'm learning from a British and a European context to this next 25 years will be interesting.
But it's interesting about the MFA being perceived as the final
Right, yeah.
degree, and I think within a university where there will be other departments and other disciplines who don't see it like
Yeah,
that. So
It's actually come from the accrediting body of the
the
university.
and the system within the state usually as well.
All right, well, that's actually also kind of a good segue into our last big topic, which is larger.
What's this expression, a segue?
Moving from one thing to the next.
It's a culture. I
Yeah,
see,
it's-
it gives no.
Floor's yours.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a part of this discussion, this reflection comes from an interrogation about what could be like best practices in implementing PhDs. You know, there's a lot of establishment. There's been a lot of talk from the conference in Ohio, but also more recently with project of Don Norman, which is refounding the design training. And I thought it's super interesting. There was a lot of ideas, and you see the variety of contexts in which people are working. And variety of contexts in which the establishment are trying to grade PhD candidates. And there's this, in all those reflections, there was always this part of the context in which it's the grades are given, which stays in the blind spot of the reflection. And I in the French region, there's a lot of French school and European school that do wants to grade PhD, but when you meet those people, you wonder, well, will you have a cohort? Do you have enough students? Even in Montreal, we wonder, do we have enough students to form a cohort of PhD? You were talking about your cohort of 20 students. I mean, it's a dream for us. 20 French-speaking PhD students per year, every year. I mean, and we wouldn't have the faculty either to supervise them all. So when you think about how you implement a PhD in those particular situations, and then every situation that exists in the world, I mean, there's all sorts of problem. What I said, I called, well, I didn't. I use the term infrastructure. I borrow it from Susan Leigh Starr, which is all the the little regulation, the little rules that you have and resources that you have to put together so that the PhD is valuable and it's also equivalent to another PhD from another establishment. So this last bucket is really to try to focus on those elements and see it's a personal preoccupation. And I would say, do you think it's possible to come at one point where we have best practices in grading PhD in design? What are the or the liminal practices? Minimum requirement for an establishment to pretend to grade PhD. Can we go there? Would that be an interesting project actually for design, the design community? And what would be the hurdles?
When you say grade, do you mean give
Right.
it a 1, 2, and 3, or do you mean pass? or fail?
Award.
Grade.
Awarded.
Yeah.
Okay,
Award.
Grant
because
PhD.
Yes.
I was doing a grade undergraduate and everything.
In French, we say we.
So,
I'm a secretary of my faculty, and I do recommend grades.
Perfect example. of-
Yeah, I recommend
Meeting.
grades.
Yeah.
So these are a few questions. I mean, it's a map of what I think would be the minimal requirement to award.
well, as Louise was saying, the trained supervisor is the first one.
Yes.
If you haven't got staff who've got PhDs themselves and been through the route,
Mhm.
then that's the first thing you need to do. So hence, you'll need to actually start training staff.
And I think even with the environment and the types of students that we have, it means that we can't rely on that traditional sort of training that we offer for. And that's the start situation. I think that we're looking at.
Then the cohort is obviously you need a cohort. But you can start on a small scale. You can have 2 or 3 working together with a
Yeah.
small cohort. You know, curriculum is an interesting.
But you proposed a curriculum. That was funny when you proposed it because I said, well, it's one among a lot of different
Yeah,
curriculum.
and you can do a curriculum.
And I will
Depending on the
argue
cohort.
on you on the value of your curriculum actually.
Yes,
But the other condition for that curriculum to go on.
yeah, you
This
need, you need a sort of framework, curriculum framework in
Yeah.
which you, if you have a cohort that you want to, but you can have a specific curriculum for an individual student as well. Because you
Can you?
well.
That would be my question.
Yes, you
Because
can.
I saw there are individualized PhD programs.
Yes.
We do
Yes.
grant PhD to people who
Oh,
are
yes.
who are along with their supervisor during 5,
I
6,
mean-
7, 8 years.
Hazel, did you,
There's-
so, you know, just, oh, go on, we've got 2 up there.
Lorenzo raised his hand first, so please go ahead.
Yes, very quickly. I guess I'm probably repeating, what I was saying just a minute ago. I think that in order to raise up the quality of the PhD programs, we need to support them networking on each other. So bringing in common the resources that means supervisors, library resources, classes, lectures around the world. This is pretty much what we're trying to do with the Commerce PhD network. While you bring them together, all together in any part of the world, and you pretty much raise, first of all, you connecting on each other. That's very important. So you supporting also the weaker programs. Many PhD programs probably they have hard life in order to get, as I was hearing just 1 minute ago, to get supervisors, for example. If you have a PhD student that is working on a specific topic, then you probably may have a challenge there to get the right supervisor. If you open up your PhD program to the rest of the world with a platform, then you really can get, each PhD student can get the best all around the world, a large selection of people and of course resources. which I think it's pretty much bringing up the level of each PhD program. At the same time, also, the final evaluation of the PhD students can be done not only locally, but internationally. That is also, you know, bringing the student into a wider scenario, wider international scenario that, of course, is supporting his growth, his or her growth. I think that the future of the PhD program has to do with networking, with I don't want to say making a huge, large PhD program, but somehow helping one each other. That means that it's not anymore a local program, but it's looking into different experiences.
Carlos?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Lorenzo said, and I want my comment is to reinforce what he is saying. I like a lot the slide that we are presenting here in terms of the resources, but I would say that these are parts, multiple parts that can be combined in so many different ways. And I think that are basic at this moment in time of design and PhDs, we have two categories of discussions. One is the program, the university that have already created a PhD degree, the ones that can already offer. And Lorenzo was highlighting this notion of it's time to think more of network, to get out of the department, think less of a vertical and isolation. And this is one type of conversation. The other one is for the PhDs that are for the university that are trying to build a PhD in design. So I think those are very different conversations. Is for the universities that are trying to build, they will look at this slide and say, how do I go about putting all that together and building that and initiating and activating this program and this degree. For the ones that have already assembled this kind of thing, all those parts, they are questioning and challenge themselves into how do I amplify and how do I raise the quality and the relevance of the work? So it's looking for a different way of configuring all those resources. But what I want to say is that in both cases, one of the most important drivers of today for that to happen is funding. So I think that we are out of the time where universities could try to build a PhD program by submitting applications, getting a group of faculty to advise and kind of bootstrapping a lot of pieces and make that happen. We are entering the space where PhD in design is a very highly funded entity. And this is going to raise the level significantly, which I think is a great thing. But most of the funding, it's going towards assembly networks. So if you think about the recent European funding for the co-design for transitions, that's an example of a major, I think it's 13 positions in 8 universities, and they are collaborating as a network, but it's individual PhDs collaborating by the EU funding. MIT is had $100 million funding to identify design in every pocket of MIT and bringing together that into the Morningside Academy, the MAD. So MIT MAD is a place to bring all the parts of design into a cohort. So they are not building a new PhD program. They are basically assembling resources from everywhere. But what is behind all that is funding. Funding is driving the allocation of resources and concentration of those resources.
That's how we got a lot of our funding in the last 10 years, has been funding not just design, but cohorts and subjects. So the UK government fund big cohorts of PhDs in co-located or sometimes not located centres around subjects. So one has just been funded, hundreds of PhDs around AI. And different universities have groups all working together, but they're not computer spec. There can be designers there as well. So one of the things I would advocate is design has to be in there with the bidders bidding around challenge-based PhD programs, because we can be a cohort in that challenge, whether it's eco, whether it's new technologies. So yeah, that is the way that it's going to go, is the funding around the
Yes, and the example I was giving about convergence, and Lorenzo, it's Politecnico, that's part of this alliance that I was referring to. It's called the Unite Alliance. It was engineering school, so they're definitely after applied sciences to find the innovation, the research, and the changes in society levers by coordinating and having these 9 universities drive their resources, and they're receiving, to your point, Carlos, a ton of money from the European Union. You have to apply to the European Union grant like you would apply to a national grant, but it's actually at the European level. And that allowed them to reflect and look at where would be the best place in Europe to study this. And where do I sending my PhD student to actually do his research or their research on that? I don't know. I've spent 3 years working with them. I don't know if it's ever going to be operationalized, but if it is, that would be a really important milestone in this endeavor.
And if I make just a quick comment to finalize that, we're going to see that in different ways happening in different contexts. So the European Union is very much government-based funding from the EU. In the US is universities with big endowments that can do things like that. So Stanford is initiating an entire vertical of design in the engineering school. So they are not starting an entire new thing. They are starting inside the engineering school. They are just concentrating all their efforts under the umbrella of design. So they are taking design from what usually was the MFA, and they are saying, no, this MFA model doesn't work. We're going to put engineering, connect to all the different fields. So design in Stanford is a vertical that's connecting all the fields, oceanography and history and all the other ones. MIT is another example that I was saying. So this notion of design being the big umbrella where interdisciplinary research is happening is the way that I'm seeing happen in the US, similar to what I'm seeing in Europe, but the funding happens in different ways. In the US, this is happening primarily not at the university level of the funding from tuition. This is happening by big endowments that are seeing design as a driver of doing PhD, challenge-based PhDs, PhDs that are working on big challenge, and they will put big money into that. And this is changing completely the game.
Thank you. See Lorenzo.
Lorenzo, maybe last word.
Yeah, thank you. Well, but I guess that the conversation is leading us into what is the strategy for design to be just a topic standing itself, or it should be standing together with other topics to be hybridized, interdisciplinary. And those that are applying for research funding in Europe know very well that we have the ERC, the European Research Council, and you need to select into a long number of topics where you're not going to find design itself. You will find design from the human studies, history of architecture, or on the other side, you find product engineering, so on the other side. But then the question which we're asking ourselves is, at least from the scientific, in Italy, we're asking ourselves if we should have a research topic that is just as design standing itself, or we should find design in many, many different topics so that you can apply in a different ways. That's a strategy I think that we need to ask ourselves. I don't have the answer, of course, myself, but that's a conversation I think that we need to push And it's not only for Europe. I guess this is an open conversation for everyone globally in order to understand if design research should keep on hybridizing with other interdisciplinary topics, other disciplines, or we should find a core ourselves that is globally recognized, even if it's a large topic, extending itself. It's a very important question that I think we need to ask ourselves as academics and as researchers, because this is also reflecting into our PhD programs. The way we open up the programs, the way we collaborate with other disciplines, and the way also we develop our identity. It's a question of identity for design.
Yes.
Mine's a little small of a point after that, but just I'm Michael Arnold-Majus, I'm from Northeastern University. We're 2 years into our PhD program. We launched a bit ago. We have a bit of a different funding model than what Carlos articulated. It's these large endowments that fund many students. Our funding model is more project-based. Individual faculty will write a grant, and need personnel. One of the challenges I think with that is the institution has to have a bit of a leap of faith with each faculty-student combo, because the project funding cycles don't always neatly line up with the academic admissions calendar, which is a very mechanical beast that just chunks along. So I'd say maybe this funding model, and coming back to what Lorenzo just said, maybe rather than, I think it's quite important to have a platform that provides like a diversity of rather than, oh, this is the one model or this is the one. I think it can be kind of polymorphous and in dialogue and maybe even in contestation a bit. It's a bit healthier system.
No time to add reflection. It would be really nice to see, by the way, Fernando Secomandi, currently at the TU Delft, but with a background in education in Brazil. Would be really nice to see this discussion being extended more to the global south institutions like in Latin America, Asia, so forth, India, so forth, because I think we also have to consider the geography of academic production and also of the production of academics, right, into account, and be more critical about that, because when we think about standards of what qualifies as a PhD and so forth, that also has to do with the employability, implications for employability of academics coming from different regions of the world, different places as well. So it would be nice to extend the discussion to the group.
Well, our time is up. You want to conclude, or I think
I'm supposed to conclude. No, the last comments, I'd like to rebound on the last comment. I mean, it seems to be all a question, this friction of infrastructure, administrative requirements. It's all a question of equivalency in a way. Does the design discipline is able to demonstrate the equivalency of what's done in that discipline with the other discipline of the university? And you want to assemble, networks of platforms that's a super idea, but you still will have to look after trained supervisor. What is a trained supervisor in La Sapienza? Is it the same thing as in, I don't know, which school somewhere, University of Montreal, for instance? Is it the same thing or not? And it's probably not the same thing, but we have to wonder, is there an equivalence? Can we really found the fact that these people are trained evaluators? These PhD subjects are PhD subject for them, valid PhD subject. Does this venue to make a PhD as a proper collection in its library to make a proper literature review? So we will have to benchmark the resources we have, the members of those networks and that. So I mean, it's all a question of Yeah, when an establishment grant a PhD, do we grant the same thing? You know, is it equivalent? It has to, we have to
Let's leave this.
wonder.
Let's leave this up there.
I'm just making a pitch because,
I was gonna do it.
oh, go for it.
No, you go, you go,
Oh,
don't do it.
No, there is a conversation, a keynote panel tomorrow.
Oh.
Is it 12?
If you enjoyed this talk, you may
Yeah.
also.
Nice. On, I mean, it's the practice research PhD, however, it's addressing questions around sort of decentering, recentering, how are PhDs being undertaken in different parts of the world from different perspectives. So I think it'll be really nice.
I'll be online.
Amazing.
So thank you all for
Thank you,
participating.
everyone.
I remind you, if you participated, please go online just to help us keep track of who asked questions, so we can give credit where credit is due when we publish the conversation in the journal.
Thank
you all for attending. Thank you.